Every single month, thousands of construction and demolition contractors across the UK sign off on direct debits and subscription fees to a vast array of trade associations, federations, and institutional bodies. It's a standard, regular business expense, often paid out of habit or a lingering sense of professional obligation. But if you sit down and look closely at the balance sheet of what these organisations actually deliver, a grim reality emerges. The sector is currently funding a graveyard. These self-appointed bodies claim to represent, protect and advance the interests of proud, hard-working industry, yet their actual output is entirely inanimate. They're dead bodies, paralysed by bureaucracy, terrified of confrontation and doing precious little for their paying members. We're living through one of the most volatile economic periods in modern construction history. Margins are razor thin, insolvencies are rife, and the regulatory burden grows heavier by the week. At a time when contractors desperately need fierce, agile, and courageous advocates to fight their corner, they're lumbered with institutions that have devolved into private dining clubs. The modern trade body has mastered the art of survival through self-aggrandizement, existing primarily to host meetings, issue vague press releases, and pat itself on the back at annual gala dinners. What makes this institutional inertia so infuriating is the stark double standard in how contractors manage their businesses today. Given the brutal reality of the current economic climate, modern construction firms are obsessively focused on ROI, return on investment. Management teams will spend weeks, if not months, rigorously evaluating a new excavator, calculating total cost of ownership down to the last penny. They'll aggressively shop around for fuel contracts, pit insurance brokers against one another, and squeeze material suppliers just to protect a fraction of a percent on their bottom line. Every single asset must justify its place on the balance sheet. Yet when it comes to the annual invoice from their chosen trade association, that hard-nosed commercial discipline vanishes. Year after year, companies blindly renew subscriptions that can run into thousands of pounds without ever demanding a clear, quantifiable return. It's treated as an untouchable legacy expense, a premium paid for a badge on a letterhead or a sticker on a tipper tailgate. If a piece of plant sat in the yard for 12 months doing absolutely nothing, it will be sold off immediately. Yet these old boys clubs sit idle year after year, achieving nothing of tangible commercial value for their members, and the checks keep clearing. It's a massive financial blind spot in an industry that otherwise watches every single penny. When the chips are down, the primary instinct of the mainstream trade association is to look the other way. They're terrified of making waves, particularly when a crisis demands actual leadership. Consider, if you will, the high-profile Collusion probe by the Competition and Markets Authority that sent shockwaves through the demolition sector. 10 major companies explicitly identified in a big rigging scandal that dragged the industry's reputation through the mud. This should have been a defining moment for the sector's leading federation. A strong, principled representative body, fiercely protective of the industry's integrity, would have taken immediate, decisive action to sanction those involved and signal that such practices would not be tolerated. Instead, the response was a collective institutional shrug. By failing to hand down any meaningful sanctions, the Federation effectively demonstrated that its priority was protecting its inner circle rather than upholding the standards of the wider sector. And frankly, when a trade association places safety guidances behind a members-only firewall, it's evident they're more focused on membership numbers and raising income than they are upon raising industry standards. This institutional spinelessness extends right into the regulatory sphere as well. There was a time when the sector looked to the official safety watchdog as a dedicated safety police, an entity focused on genuinely improving welfare, sharing best practices, and working collaboratively with contractors on site. That cooperative spirit is gone. That watchdog has morphed into a commercial enterprise, seemingly far more interested in balance sheets than building sites. Its primary focus now appears to be the aggressive collection of fees via the controversial fee for intervention scheme. Rather than acting as a supportive partner in accident prevention, it behaves like a revenue-driven corporate machine. Yet the major trade bodies remain utterly silent on this commercial shift. The absolute failure of these bodies to act as an effective shield for the industry was definitively laid bare during the battle over the red diesel subsidy. The removal of that subsidy was a financial hammer blow to heavy plant operators and demolition contractors, adding millions of pounds in overnight costs to project overheads. What did our multi-million pound trade associations do? They did nothing until the ink was already dry on the legislation. A handful of organisations scrambled to put together a panicked, superficial lobbying campaign, but it was textbook, too little, too late. The Treasury simply marched right over them. The harsh reality is that these associations have completely failed to move with the times. Decades ago, before the digital age, they served a genuine practical purpose as information hubs. A key part of their role was the regional dissemination of complex updates from government and other authority organisations. Today, that function is totally obsolete. Every contractor in the land has regulatory updates, market data, and legal news delivered directly to their smartphone or computer in real time. The trade body as information gatekeeper is dead. And furthermore, the grand myth that these organisations hold the ear of government or maintain powerful relationships with influential MPs has been completely shattered. Westminster doesn't care about trade association badges. Look at the Tier 1 contractors. Giants like Balfour Beatty famously walked away from the umbrella organisation Build UK for the simple reason that the contractors themselves have far, far closer, more direct ties to government than the bodies claiming to represent them. If the largest players in the market bypass the associations to speak directly to lawmakers, what exactly are the smaller members paying for? If these organisations are not lobbying effectively, if they're not fixing the skills crisis, and if they're not defending equipment hire rates, what are they actually doing with their members' money? Over the past decade, there's been a severe dilution of purpose. Not so long ago, these bodies were laser focused on representing their members' core interests and improving the physical reality of the industry. Today, they've become completely distracted by corporate tick box exercises. They spend vast amounts of time, members' money, and energy churning out endless glossy reports on sector diversity and subjective environmental targets. While contractors are trying to figure out how to survive the next quarter, their trade bodies are busy drafting corporate sociology papers. They've become self-perpetuating bureaucracies. I genuinely cannot recall the last time a mainstream trade body achieved a single tangible victory that moved their members or the wider industry forward. It's only fair, I think, to acknowledge that a tiny handful of organisations still understand the original brief, or that they've shifted that brief to align with modern industry needs. They prove that it's still possible to provide genuine value when an organisation is run with passion and clear purpose rather than bureaucratic inertia. Despite operating in a niche within a niche, the Scottish Plant Owners Association, or the SPOA, put the rest of the industry to shame during the red diesel crisis. They didn't sit on their hands. They fought a remarkably brave, spirited and vocal campaign against the Treasury's tax grab. They stood up, they engaged the media, rallied their members, and they made their voices heard loud and clear. Even though the government ultimately refused to listen, the SPOA gave their members real representation. Similarly, the Institute of Demolition Engineers continues to demonstrate what a professional body could and should look like. Rather than getting bogged down in industry politics, endless committee meetings, and corporate virtue signalling, they've redoubled their efforts to actually educate the sector. Through a consistent, high-quality series of well-attended physical seminars and online webinars, they're actively raising the professional and technical standards of the demolition industry from the ground up. But these honourable exceptions only serve to highlight how dismal the rest of the institutional landscape truly is. The UK construction and demolition sectors are facing unprecedented operational headwinds, supply chain volatility, and shifting economic sands. To survive, it needs fierce, modern, and aggressive advocates who are willing to ruffle feathers and challenge authority. But what we have is a graveyard of outdated, passive institutions that view their membership base merely as a funding mechanism for their own survival. Unless these trade bodies can remember how to fight for the people who pay their wages, it's time for contractors to stop signing the checks. It's time to walk away, cancel the subscriptions, and finally bury the dead bodies of British construction.